Inquiry-based learning can take on many different forms, from highly structured play to students spontaneously asking questions and figuring out how to test them. Inquiry is not a free-for-all where students are expected, for example, to spontaneously rediscover Newton's laws of motions by themselves. Newton made use of thousands of years of combined knowledge to make his discoveries. Students can't be expected to make bold conclusions in a vacuum of knowledge. That's why Andrea decides to start her lessons by laying down a foundation of basic content.
What simple machines do is they move objects. They help us move objects. I'm going to write that on the board.
In other words, Andrea is going to teach. Teaching content being something that she's comfortable with and knows she's good at. Here, Andrea is teaching about simple machines with an emphasis on inclined planes. One thing Andrea keeps in mind is that the overall expectation in the science curriculum is to link the content to society and the environment.
One of these simple machines.
A ramp?
Excellent.
Andrea makes some of these links by showing off a variety of simple machines in our everyday lives, something that she learned about in her online searches.
Using a lever, you just didn't know it. A wheel and axle, that's right. So here's my axle, here's my wheel.
She's also teaching the students about how simple machines make our lives easier.
Heavy things like that.
Once Andrea has gone over some fundamental concepts, she and her class are now ready to move on to some basic structured inquiry. With structured inquiry, Andrea will provide her students with a question to answer or a problem to solve, and give her students a procedure to follow in order to arrive at a solution. She will not, however, provide the students with the solution. That's up to them to figure out.
This is what you're going to do. You're going to take one book, and you're going to put your inclined plane on the book, and inside you will find a styrofoam ball. You're going to take your styrofoam ball, you're going to put it at the top of your inclined plane, and you're going to let it roll down. And wherever it stops, you're going to let it stop. You're going to measure from the end of the inclined plane to the middle of the ball, and you're going to write it down. So for one book, you're going to roll the ball and write down how many centimeters it went. Do that 2 more times. Then what you're going to do is you're going to do it for how many books do you think now?
2.
2. So you're going to add another textbook and do it again 3 times. And then you're going to do it again. How many textbooks this time? 3. You guys are too smart. And make sure that someone in the group is recording all the measurements. So someone can help it roll, someone can measure it, and someone can be writing. That way everyone in the group has a role.
Here, not only do we see Andrea using structured inquiry to help the students become familiar with the materials, but structured inquiry also helps them go over the content that they have just learned. Notice how Andrea has separated the class into groups of 6. Typically, groups of 3 are ideal. It means everyone gets a chance to make use of the materials and perform some experimenting or problem solving. Now that the students have a good knowledge and experience foundation and have had a chance to become familiar with the materials, Andrea can start to push the limits of what her class can achieve.
Does everyone see that? So when you increase the steepness...
It's at this point that Andrea will challenge her students with a guided inquiry activity. With guided inquiry, Andrea will pose a question to her class and present them with a problem to solve. Using what they have learned up until this point, it will be up to the students to figure out a procedure to follow and ultimately arrive at the solution. Guided inquiry presents the perfect opportunity to spark students' imaginations by allowing Andrea to present creative scenarios for students to take part in. By looking at curriculum expectations, Andrea can come up with scenario ideas that link the content to society and the environment.
There's any way I can move this and get Barry to the top of the bench? There is a simple machine that we could use to help Barry. What do you think?
A ramp.
A ramp. And what's the word again for ramps that we're going to be using? Excellent. But you have to build an inclined plane to get Barry to the top of the mountain. We have lots of inclined planes, so what could we do with all these inclined planes? And I have masking tape in here as well. What could we do?
We can just tape them up.
Absolutely. You have to get Barry to the top of the hill. You move Barry by moving the mountain.
Guided inquiry can be incredibly rewarding for a class. Teachers will often hear their students cheer when they arrive at a working solution to a challenging problem. Guided inquiry also achieves a strong balance between student freedom and constraints. Students are instructed to solve a specific problem with specific tools, but are given the freedom to arrive at the solution using their own strategies. The end result is that students take ownership of their work and arrive at the lesson's desired conclusions without being overwhelmed by too many options and going too far off the beaten track. It takes practice to create a guided inquiry activity that really hooks students. If an activity is compelling enough, it's often at this stage that Andrea will encounter students who won't want to stop playing and building. their motivation can be quite high.
You were able to get Barry to the top of the mountain. That's every single group. Everyone, big round of applause. Good job. You all got Barry to the top. Very good. So you have to get the medicine to him. Now here's the problem.
Here, Andrea is presenting a second activity that she has previously observed to be quite appealing to students.
You have to build a transport system to move the
It's also often during guided inquiry that students will start asking questions, trying to delve deeper into the content. These questions are the key to the next step in inquiry, open inquiry. Open inquiry is a byproduct of other forms of inquiry. With open inquiry, the teacher does not provide the solution, the method, nor the question. The students come up with the questions. Because Andrea has scaffolded the inquiry, students should feel comfortable enough now with the materials to answer many of the inquiry questions that they or their colleagues might have. Doing so would involve making predictions and planning their own procedure with some teacher assistance. Here, Andrea encourages the students to come up with questions about inclined planes that can be answered through experimentation. She and the class are going to figure out which questions can be tested using the available materials. Ultimately, because the questions come from the students' curiosity, there is a high intrinsic motivation to arrive at a conclusion. Open inquiry leads to powerful teachable moments and is incredibly satisfying for students and teachers who both use the opportunity to learn something new. Check out the next video in this inquiry series to learn all about the teacher skills needed to successfully incorporate inquiry-based learning in the classroom.